Hello, and welcome to Nahood's collaboration with Faces and Voices of Recovery, Healing Together, Lived Experiences, and Effective Support in HIV and Substance Use Recovery. My name is Ashley Johnson, and my pronouns are she, her. We invite you to use the chat to engage with your fellow attendees, drop your name, organization, and we have a fun question today. What's your favorite dinosaur? Throughout the session, please use the Q&A pod to ask your questions. The speakers will address them at the end of the presentation. Today's session will be recorded, and a PDF of the presentation slides will be added to Nahood's website as a resource. You will receive this information in the post-webinar email that will be sent out through Zoom. You can also visit Nahood's resource page on the website to find this resource and view past sessions. NAHOOD is a membership organization of 8 regional and 2 national AIDS education and training centers, AETCs, that support the AETC program mission. Established in 2010, NAHOOD supports the AETCs, a component of the HRSA-funded Ryan White HIV and AIDS program, which have an explicit directive to build and maintain a well-educated and culturally sensitive health professions workforce that can provide prevention, diagnosis, care and treatment, and medical management for people at risk and living with HIV. NAHU collaborates with multiple organizations in order to promote and educate on the work of the ATC program. Since 2018, NAHU has been funded by the American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry as a partner organization of the Opioid Response Network to address the intersection of HIV and opioid use disorder. ORN was created to support efforts in addressing the prevention, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction of opioid use disorders and substance use disorders through the provision of locally designed education and training. Visit the website to submit a TA request, read case studies, see featured resources, check out upcoming ORN events and trainings, and learn about ORN work groups addressing health disparities and more. There will be a post-evaluation survey that will be emailed to you after today's webinar and must be completed within 3 weeks to receive CME, CNE, and social work CE. I'm sorry, 2 weeks, or a certificate of attendance. After 2 weeks, once the survey is closed, it will not be reopened. The minimum attendance requirement to receive CE is 60% of today's webinar. Participants who accrue less than 60% will not be eligible for CE. Certificates will be emailed within 3 weeks of completing the evaluation. CE credits issued for participation may not apply towards license renewal in all states. It is your responsibility to verify the requirements of your state's licensing boards. And today, we have the pleasure in having Joseph Sanchez here with us. He is the Chief Program Officer with Faces and Voices of Recovery, bringing 18 years of experience in recovery-related agencies. As a person in substance use recovery and living with HIV for 21 years, Joseph's personal journey fuels his passion for strengthening recovery connections within communities. He has coordinated and organized recovery events and projects to foster collaboration among professionals, enhancing the recovery network throughout Texas. Joseph has assisted in managing grant and funding stream contracts, including planning action steps to meet deliverables, monitoring progress of meeting deliverables, and quarterly reporting on deliverables. Joseph is a qualified and experienced trainer of trainers and is currently listed as a subject matter expert for multiple national TTA centers and in the SAMHSA Consultant Directory. He has extensive experience in curriculum development and oversees the program's delivering services as it pertains to accrediting and certifying organizations and programs that seek accreditation and RCO certification in meeting national standards, the Recovery Centered Organization Membership Program, and the Training and Technical Assistance Program, of which multiple state and subcontract deliverables are met. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Joseph Sanchez.
Thank you, Ashley. Uh, I'm spotlighted, and welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, to everyone here. Thanks again to Nahud and Oren, with all your efforts and the partnership. On my end, we just did a little bit of a pivot. Patrick is showing slides. Um, this way, I can focus on y'all and not having to advance slides. I have to say, I'm really excited and honored to serve as your moderator for this panel discussion, as it's a topic area that's near and dear to my heart. As previously mentioned, my name is Joseph Sanchez. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I have been living with HIV for over 21 years. That's a long time when I start to stop and think about it. It was recommended that I get tested for HIV when I went to a clinic to be treated for something I picked up while I was sleeping in a strange place. Um, After a week or two, um, I returned to the clinic for my follow-up, and the doctor delivered the news. He said, I have some good news and bad news. Good news, what you came for was treated, it's gone. Bad news, you're HIV positive. I don't recall the rest of the day. I don't recall the rest of the day because I got completely trashed. I do recall the doctor trying to put me at ease by comparing HIV to diabetes, to which my response was, I'm Hispanic, diabetes runs in my family, HIV doesn't. I was allowed to leave the clinic alone, distraught, angry, scared, and broken. That was July of 2003, and I was 23 years old. And later that year, I had my second suicide attempt that left me 5 minutes from death. It was 2 years later that I started my recovery journey, started seeing a doctor regularly who was familiar with recovery and the process and made sure to check in, not just on my health. Oh, getting switched around there. Thanks. Um, Sorry about that. So the doctor didn't just check in on my health, but my recovery as well. Patrick, you're killing me.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
sorry.
Not a problem. Um, So my doctor, she made me feel empowered and informed, and really, to be honest, she set the bar high for medication, for anyone who would provide care for me moving forward. When I did start medication, my CD4 count was 235, with a diagnosis of full-blown AIDS at a count of 230. She didn't start me on medication until she knew that I was serious about my recovery, because she knew that my substance use would impact my adherence to my medication. I know I'm a miracle for having dodged many life-threatening circumstances, and I'm honored to introduce you to our panelists, who are heroes, role models, walking miracles, and if I may be frank, resilient AF. So we'll go in a round robin style throughout this panel, and we'll start off with some introductions. Um, so I'm really grateful for the panelists and their willingness to share their experience with us. And thank you ahead of time for sharing these very vulnerable and intimate moments with us. We want to recognize that not everyone's journey and process is the same. We have the opportunity today to listen to how we can make improvements to our systems of care. So, panelists, I'll call on you, and if you could tell us your name, pronouns, and briefly share your personal journey, and what were some of the most significant challenges you faced and how you overcame them. We're going to start off with introducing our panelist, Chris.
Hey, all. My name is Chris. I'm a crystal meth addict residing out of Brooklyn, New York. I just want to thank everyone for bringing me on board for this. I love speaking at things like this. Any opportunity I get to like share my story with folks, with medical professionals in particular, I find it really meaningful. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And really tell my story. I don't know. There's so much story to tell. Um, so I uh, where to begin? I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, one of two Black families in my neighborhood, and immediately felt othered and was told that I was othered. And that is not a great feeling when you're 5, 6 years old, to realize that you're not just like the rest of the kids in your neighborhood. And, you know, I don't know, through my like school years, I really got good at people pleasing and perfectionism. It really helped me. It was sort of like an armor for me. You couldn't make fun of me if I was the smartest in the classroom, if I was the funniest, if I had the most friends, if I was the fastest on the track. And those things really served me well. But then adolescence came and things started to change in my brain. And I really was struggling to find community. I really was looking for a place where I belonged. With my Black family, I didn't really feel like I fit in because I was too white for them. And with my counterparts at school, I was Black. And so I didn't really fit in then. I was really effeminate. Um, and so I really looked for community elsewhere. And luckily, I'm a child of the 90s. And so the internet came along and I found my community there. And, from the jump, it was like addict behavior. Like I was lying about it. I was staying up until 4 or 5 in the morning in these chat rooms, talking to folks, just looking for a place to just, I don't know, find community. And that lasted for a couple of years. And then I found the phone lines, which were these like numbers that you called, you left voice messages, and then you connected with people. And that's when I was sort of first introduced to sex. And um, once that happened, it was sort of like off to the races. I was sneaking out late at night, meeting up with these men I definitely should not have been meeting up with. And I loved it. It was the first time I felt, I don't want to say seen, but I felt seen by people. It was the first time I was given compliments willingly. My mother was great. She provided a lot, but she didn't have a lot of love to offer. She was a single parent raising two kids in a high stress job. And so when she came home from work, she didn't really have a lot of bandwidth to be nurturing and loving like those mothers I saw on television. And so I gravitated toward these men for that sort of like that affection. Um, I came out when I was 14 and had a big fight with my mom. And, that resulted in me moving out. I moved in with some family friends and went to a different middle school in a different school district, which was far more affluent than the one I was at before. And although it was a culture shock, I definitely found more people. I found more queer folks. And that was really um, eye-opening to me to just find people who were um, happy and supported in their queerness. And I loved those people. They were wonderful. Um, After a year of that, I decided that I didn't want to move home and I didn't want to live with these family friends again. So I made the choice to live on the streets and be homeless. And that was, I don't know, that was a really difficult time for a few reasons. One, my friends at school didn't know that I was homeless. Two, I did find community with other queer folks who were also homeless. There were some lovely, lovely organizations in Portland, Oregon for homeless queer youth, and places where I could sleep if I didn't want to sleep on the street all the time. But what I did happen was I started doing sex work, and through that sex work, I was introduced to crystal meth. And crystal meth, crystal meth. The first time I used it, I just remember feeling all the tension in my body just completely dissipate. Right. For the first time, I felt um worry free. For the first time, I I don't know, I kind of felt like, wow, is this how everyone is living their life? Just sort of like without a care in the world, no tension, no anger. I had a lot of built up anger in my body. And, you couple that with sex, and I kind of was off to the races. My use slowly progressed from 2 to 3 times a week or 2 to 3 times a month to maybe every day. And I didn't really see a lot of consequences until my senior year of high school. At this point, I was trained to be a professional dancer, and I started not getting cast in things. I realized I was getting really irritable and picking fights with folks. And when I got the opportunity to move to New York, I decided that I wasn't going to use crystal meth or do drugs or alcohol. And you know, I I really wanted that to be true, you know, and I moved to New York and I got here and I'm in the big city and I'm loving it. I'm going to school at this prestigious dance school, and I ran out of money. I got here and I had my little Capital One credit card with my like $250 limit on it. And I ran out of money really quickly. And, I grew up in a household that was very much like, you turn 18, you move out, you're all on your own, so I didn't think that I could ask my mom for help. Um, and so I did the thing that I always did when things got weird, or whenever I was having a strong feeling, I reached out to crystal meth. And, um, it puts a small band-aid, on whatever I was feeling. But what happens is I come out of the 2 or 3, 4 day stupor and my problems are still there. I resurfaced a week later. I still didn't have any money, still didn't know how I was going to get to school, still didn't know how I could like talk to my mom. And that was kind of my cycle for many years. That first year in New York was really difficult. I was separated from pretty much all of my friends. I was in a huge city where I didn't really know anyone. I didn't know how I was going to make my way. And yeah, I think back to that time now because that was 20 years ago. Um, and I just remember feeling really, really, I don't want to say desolate, but I didn't have a lot of hope. I had taken a big risk and moving across the country to pursue this career, and I really felt alone in the world. And meth sort of gave me, and that meth community sort of gave me a community. And, I will say in the meth community, there isn't a lot of talk around safer sex, right? It's just sex with drugs and you just do it, and there isn't lot of conversations around it. And I'd gotten tested for the first time, I think I was 16, and then decided I wasn't going to get tested again. I just was going to engage in these risky behaviors. And I want to say December of 2004, I noticed my body started to change. I noticed that my lymph nodes were really sore and I was losing a lot of weight. And I kind of knew what was up. I kind of knew that I was seroconverting. Um, But then I went on a really long tour, an international tour that lasted like 5 months. And that was one of the hardest times of my life, knowing that this thing was happening to my body, but still being having to perform almost every night and not being able to talk to anyone about it. And I got off of that tour and knew I needed to get tested, but just kept putting off the inevitable. Finally, a friend of mine who worked in HIV care convinced me to get tested in September. He just showed up at my apartment and was like, "Hey, we're gonna go get tested today." And I was like, "Fuck." And I went and got tested, and the test results were positive. And I lied. I lied to my friend and said that they were negative. Um, and just sort of put it in the back of my brain. Um, and didn't really seek care for another 5 years. Um, and so, over the years, my drug use just got worse and worse and worse and worse, and in and out of relationships. I would have bouts of sobriety, a month here, 2 months here, a week here, and I I knew that something was up and I didn't quite understand what it was. And I knew that I wanted to stop, but I just didn't know how. I didn't know that recovery was possible. I did have someone bring me to a meeting, um, a Crystal Meth Anonymous meeting, like 2006. And I went to that space and I didn't see myself reflected in the room, right? I was young, I was Black, I was very visibly queer, and most of the folks in the room were men in their 30s and 40s who were white. And I just didn't see myself reflected in that space. And so I never went back. And so, I continued to use, continued to use, continued to use. I got married and to another addict and really just destroyed that relationship with my use. And during my entire marriage, my husband and my best friend were like, "You've got to get help. You've got to go to rehab." And I was just so resistant. I had all these reservations as to um, why I couldn't stop and why I couldn't go to rehab. And, something finally changed. It was my 30th birthday and I had begged my husband to throw me a 30th birthday party and invite all my friends and get me this momofuku cake and all this stuff. And I basically was living with my drug dealer at the time. And it's the morning of my birthday. I'm waking up and my drug dealer and I are having this huge knockdown, drag out fight. And I finally get a moment alone and I look around in my life and I think, I was meant for so much more. I moved here with a dream and a goal, and so many of my peers were having the best careers of their life and making Broadway debuts and winning Tonys. And I was in this dirty apartment fighting with someone about a broken toilet, you know, and I was like, I just deserve better than this. And I really wasn't sure what to do. Luckily, I had a friend who had gone to rehab earlier in that year, and I just gave them a call, and I said, "Hey, listen, I don't know what to do. I don't want to continue living this way, and but I just don't know what to do." And so they're like, "Great, we can get you in today or tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, here's the thing, I've got stuff like that to like wrap up here. I've got to get my ducks in a row. Why don't we shoot a date for like end of July or August?" And my birthday's in June, by the way, when I'm calling. And they're like, "It doesn't really work that way. Why don't we continue to text and call and check in with you, and when you're ready, we'll get you on a plane." And so a month goes by and I'm really starting to like take small steps to get myself ready, and I started using less and less, but I was still using. And finally, the day comes, and I tell them, all right, let's get me a ticket. I come home and I'm packing my bags, which is the thing I did normally when I would come home. I'd come home, I'd swap my clothes out, I'd say hi to my husband, and then I would leave again. So this time it was very much the same. I come home, we sort of get in an argument about where I've been, what I've been doing, and I'm packing again. Except for this time, I said, I need you to take me to the airport. I'm going to rehab. And just the look on his face, I will never forget it. It just was um it was, yeah, it's just a look I'll never forget. And I went to that rehab in Dallas, and same sort of story. I went, thank you. Um went to a rehab, and it was in Dallas, and again I didn't see myself reflected. But something sort of shifted on the third day, where I started to hear the solution. I started to hear the things I wanted. People were repairing their relationships with their families. They were getting their careers back. And from then on, I just was sort of like, what do I got to do to make that happen? And, I've been in 12-step recovery now. I'll have 9 years and 2 months and a couple of days. And I've just done everything that people have suggested of me, and continue to do the work and shift my program when I needed to. And I've been of service, and I do things like this, and it has kept me sober. So yeah, I think that's it for me for now. I know we're gonna have questions at the end. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Chris. Our next panelist to introduce themselves is Scott.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott. I actually now go by Scotty. Um, I Thanks for sharing, Chris. I too spent a very long time in New York City trying to be the world's best Broadway actor and all that stuff. So I related to a lot of what you had to say, and thank you for sharing that. Let me see. I basically I come from a long line of alcoholics. I do believe that I have the distinct I don't know if it's privilege, but yeah, I guess privilege, because I'm trying to use it for good now, of being the first drug addict in my family. I like Chris. I too am a crystal meth addict. But quite honestly, my disease likes for me to use shopping as well. Just a whole bunch of different kinds of stuff. Um, I grew up in a in a small town in Illinois. Um, and I grew up kind of in the middle of agribusiness. Every time I say Illinois, everyone's like, "Oh, Chicago," and I'm like, "No, Chicago is actually is actually very much like New York City. There's a whole other state below that big city, and that's where I grew up. I grew up where there's corn on this side of the road and soybeans on this side of the road, and I saw I knew from a very young age that I was different, and I didn't know what that meant. I just didn't feel like I just I felt other as well. But in a way of like these, I'm not a small town person. I remember, and now I'm going to show my age. I remember when I was around 10 years old, I saw The Goodbye Girl, and that was a movie that happened in New York City. And I instantly, when I saw that movie, I was like, "That's where I'm going to live." So I basically, kind of lived lived my life. I found theater at a very young age, and that was one place that I felt at home. It was also one place where I felt like I got recognition. I am the last of five children. I am 6 years younger than the next youngest. And so I love my parents, but they were very much overparenting by the time I came around. So I pretty much I pretty much got to do whatever the heck I wanted. Um, and I was I was a good boy. I mean, I followed rules and stuff like that. But one thing that I learned from my family was to hide. Um, my father is has a high school education, and he worked in the cemetery industry his whole life, and he took a single cemetery and turned it into two cemeteries, nine funeral homes, and three businesses that supplied the funeral industry nationally. So that kind of gives you an idea of uh, you know, I couldn't go anywhere in this town without someone going, "You're Jim Darby's son, aren't you?" And I hated that. There was also a sense growing up of we cannot let people know what's really going on. We always have to put a face forward that everything is fine and we're great. And so I learned to do that really early, um, and developed a pretty large ego to protect myself from what I was really feeling. And so I actually ended up going to. I got accepted to NYU. They were starting a musical theater program, and I got accepted to that program. But my mother didn't want me to go. She said it was too far away. And so I decided to go to a small university in Decatur, Illinois. And if you've never been to Decatur, Illinois, it's okay. It was not my favorite. It was not my favorite of places, and I was unhappy. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew where I wanted to go, and so it was in college when I started drinking, and I very much believe in the disease concept of of addiction. Um, there's definitely something that happens to me. There's some sort of change that happens to me when I put a substance or alcohol in my body. And so I joined a fraternity just because there was always a keg in the in the basement, and I drank my way through 2 years of college. One night I was sitting with my good friend Jeff, and we were drunk. And Jeff looked at me and he said, "Are you really happy here?" And I'm like, "No, I hate it here." And he's like, "Why don't we just go be actors?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go be actors." So we decided to drop out of college, and I decided to move to Chicago. Chicago's when is where I came out. Um, I love Chicago very much, but that's sort of when the unmanageability started happening. I started working for a costume shop, and learned how to sew. Um, I was going out every night. I started go-go dancing. Well, actually, we called it stripping back then. Um, and then I met this person, and I did not realize until 10 years after the fact that he was a sex worker. And every now and then we would have experiences, and I was trafficked and I didn't realize it. Um, thank goodness, because back then, had I had that knowledge, I don't know what I would have done. Um, but anyway, I was trafficked a few times. My mother begged and pleaded me to leave Chicago. And I said, "Okay, but I'm going to New York." And she said, "I don't care. Go to school in New York. Just go back to school." So I went to a small um, musical. It's called the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, and I went there. So I moved to New York City in 1991. And that was a great time to be in New York, because everything was changing. New York, in the 70s and the 80s, almost went bankrupt, and it was in the 90s when New York started to come back. So I was finally in the city that I wanted to live in, doing what I wanted to do. I was in classes. I was in classes, every day, taking dance classes, taking, acting classes. It was just where I wanted to be. Um, and that was great. But I did take that little habit of drinking with me. Um, I moved there when I was 20, and I remember my 21st birthday was spent in the middle. I was at 76th and Broadway, across from a bar called Blondie's, and I uh, I was yelling at people to honk at me because it's my birthday. That night ended with me and my best friend at the time, and the girl that he was seeing. The three of us. I remember the three of us crawling towards the toilet, racing to get there, and I won. The problem is, when the three of you are racing to do that and you win, that means that the two people behind you, when they hear you, they just do it all over you. So I ended my 21st birthday covered in in alcoholic throw up. Um, didn't really think that that was a big deal, because you know what, I'm in my early 20s, I'm doing my thing. Then I went to Club USA. Club USA was my first dance club in New York, and I walked into this space that I never even imagined was possible. There was it was just a huge dance floor and a stage, and these four like androgynous male and female dancers, sexy as hell. I'm in this group of, of amazing, weird, wonderful people. Um, and there was a slide that went from the back of the balcony through the dance floor and down. And I started going to dance clubs because I thought that was just the end all be all. Meanwhile, this is all when Michael Alec Party Monster thing was going on. So club kids and expressing themselves individually, and crystal meth were amazing. Um, I pretty much I pretty much became a major crystal meth addict the first time that I tried it. I mean, the first time I tried it, I thought I had found the answer. Um, all of my all of my otherness, my cares and concerns, they all went away, and I just felt on top of the world. And I could do anything, I could say anything, I could be whoever I wanted to be. And so what I did was, I chose to I chose to add sex into my crystal meth, and so basically I stopped going out a whole lot and started just going to bathhouses and staying at bathhouses. It started out one night, and then it went to two nights, and then it went to three nights in a row, and I could always I could always pretty much stop it after 3 days. But that first day back at work, after school, that first day back at work was hard. Um, but I did that for a long time. And then something happened there where I missed work, and nobody knew where I was. Nobody heard from me. Everyone was worried, and someone said to me, "I think that maybe you need to go seek help." And so I went, okay, I can do that. I constantly have this cycle in my life of things going out of control, and then me trying to get control, and then things going out of control, and then me trying to get control. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to get control, and I'm going to do this. So I didn't want to deal with the fact that I might be a drug addict. So what I chose was Sexual Compulsives Anonymous. And um, Meetings in New York City are they just hit different. You walk into a meeting, and I mean, I was going to meetings where there were 300 people and you could still smoke. So, so 12-step recovery did not resonate with me because it's just hard. It's hard in New York to do a 12-step program unless you can find a small meeting. But I was, I mean, I was manipulating myself and finding all these big meetings and going to these big meetings because then that way I didn't really have to look at the fact that, my life was falling apart. Um, Part of getting things back together was that I was going to, I had come into a large sum of money from the family business. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do this responsibly. So I signed up for, I was going to put money into an IRA, and then I was also going to get a life insurance policy. And, when you do a life insurance policy, you have to take a blood test. And I found out I didn't get the life insurance. And um, I remember it was my 30th birthday, and I had had my chart done. And the guy who was doing my chart said, "Have you had some really like astounding news in your life?" And I was like, "Well, no, not really." And he's like, "No, seriously, like I need like big news." And I said to him, I said, "Well, I mean, I just signed up for life insurance and I didn't get it." And he said, "Do you know why?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You need to go find out why." And then he said, I it's going to rock your world, but I want you to know everything's going to be okay." And so I went to my GP, and he said, "So do you know why you're here?" And I knew what it was. I knew I was HIV positive. Um, I just didn't want to hear it out loud because once I heard it out loud, it was real. Um, and I'm real good at hiding and making things all bright and shiny. Um, and he told me, he said, "You are HIV positive." And I said, "Okay." And he said, I can help you." He said, "But I am going to send you to Paul Bellman." And at the time, Paul Bellman was probably one of the best known HIV doctors in New York City at that time. He was the first medical student to work with the first person diagnosed with GRID in New York. So he had been around it for a very long time. And so I went to Dr. Bellman, and he didn't really ask about my drug use. He didn't ask about my alcohol use. He's very well known for taking people who were kind of on the verge of full-blown AIDS and bringing them back to life. That was what he was known for. Um, so when I was diagnosed in 2002. So it has been 22 years for me. Um, he said to me, "It looks to me by your numbers, it looks to me like you have just serial converted." I don't remember serial converting. I don't remember feeling sick or anything like that. And he said, "It looks to me like you have a new infection." He said, the drugs are out there because the protease inhibitors had already been made, but he said, "You are going, I'm going to keep you off because the drugs are still a little toxic." Um, and and he said, "We're going to keep you off of them until I see your numbers trending down." And I actually um, stayed off of antiretrovirals for 7 years. By that time, the second generation of meds, or the second or third generation of meds, had come on, and things in my life. I started doing Sexual Compulsives Anonymous. I picked a sponsor who I could easily manipulate. So I wasn't really working a program of recovery. Um, I things were not going well with my career, so I decided I'm going to I'm going to leave New York, and I'm going to try something else with my life. So I thought I'm going to go to school. And so I went to upstate New York. I I kind of stayed sober for this portion of it. And then I got to Austin, Texas, through grad school. I ended up going to grad school for costume technology, and so pardon me, I'm at work and people are starting to come into work. Um, I ended up in Austin, Texas, and I decided that I was going to really check out recovery, and so I decided to go to Narcotics Anonymous. And I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and it was there that I actually felt comfortable. And I met this guy by the name of Joseph Sanchez, who uh, who started like asking me questions I really didn't want to answer. And It really was annoying at first because all I wanted to do was hide. Um, but I'm grateful for meeting this man because he never stopped asking the questions, and I started answering them. And the more that I started answering them, the more I was like, okay, I need to be here and I need to do this. So I got myself a sponsor, and I started working the steps. And once you start working the steps, you it does it, for me it worked. And the only thing is, once you start working the steps and you start looking you start looking at the reasons why you're using and the things that are going on, that was a lot for me to deal with because my entire life was just hide it all. So there I am looking messy, and I hated it. So what did my ego do? My ego decided that I would start a recovery organization with my good friend. And we started what was known back then as the Recovery Alliance of Austin. Is it still a Recovery Alliance, or is it a Recovery ATX now? It's Recovery ATX now. Um, so here we were being the faces of recovery, and that was too much for me. And so I secretly started to go to the bathhouse and use again. And that progressively got worse. And it ended when I walked into the HEB grocery store with a dog in my arms, and I just walked up to someone at the customer service desk and I said, I need help. I'm high and I'm scared. And they were fantastic with me. They sat with me until the police came. I didn't want to go home because I was in psychosis, and they that we looked through the blinds to see, the shadow people were after me, and they were going to kill me. I had actually earlier, before walking into the grocery store, called my sister and told her that I needed her to be on the phone because they were after me and they were going to kill me, and I needed her to be able to track me through GPS. um, and They took my dog. And the one thing that I've always had in my life are my animals, and I love my animals more than I love most people. And so I I chose to go to rehab. And so I went to this. There's this great bastion of recovery in sort of Central West Texas called Kerrville, and I went to Starlight Recovery, and I needed to get out of the general population, and I needed to kind of for the craziness to stop, and so it did. And while I was in rehab, I just sort of started realizing all the things that the choices that I'd made, I had distanced myself from my family because I wanted to do what I wanted to do without hearing from them. My father is I am very much my father's son. We are very much alike, and my father's very opinionated. And I couldn't have that. And when I was in rehab, I decided that I needed to be a part of, I wanted to be a more active part of my life. And so I ended up going to Phoenix, which is where I am now. And I've got to, I got to round this up. Basically, I've been in Phoenix for 9 years. Um, got a sponsor. I discovered the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that actually really affected me. And so I started working that program, and that program got me to a lot of realities, and those realities caused me to relapse. I ended up actually going to another rehab facility last year, the Pride Institute in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It is specifically geared towards LGBTQ people, and it's there that I sort of started seeing other opportunities besides just 12-step recovery. I realized that I needed a therapist. And so I started working with a therapist, also a psychiatrist, because I was diagnosed with mild depression. And so I've been doing the work. I am doing the work now. I'm within my first, I'm still on my first, waiting for my first year of recovery. Uh, and I'm feeling good. Um, and for the first time, I'm able to say, you know what? It's not all okay. And I'm okay with saying that. So I'm making progress, slowly, with the help of professionals. Um, I still work with my sponsor, but it's less step work, and it's more emotional and psychological work. And meditation has helped me a lot, a lot. So I'm just moving forward, and I'm living day by day, and I am, I'm fixing things that I felt just weren't working for me, and so that's what I'm doing. Um, and thanks for letting me share my story.
Thank you, Scott. On this end, you were on one of the bigger screens, so you can now say that you were on the big screen.
Ah, there you go. I did do an episode of All My Children.
That has never aired. And now we're going to our next panelist, Miguel, and it looks like you're in a professional setup.
Everyone, thank you all. Thank you, Chris and Scott, for sharing. That was really great to hear your story. In many ways, very relatable. Everybody can hear me, correct? Okay, cool. This is the first time I'm using this camera, so the lighting and everything is a little off, but I'm glowing, I was told. It's fabulous. So my name is Miguel. My pronouns are he, they. I live in Austin, Texas right now, but I was born and raised to to parents who were part of a religious cult that traveled around, and we traveled around a lot. I spent most of my childhood and teenage years in Latin America, born and raised in Argentina, and traveled around a little bit. Um, I'm not going to go too much into detail because that's an entire history of its own. But I spent a lot of time as a kid being believing in very strict, very deep deep doctrines, being very indoctrinated by a very cultish version of Christianity and biblical beliefs and practices and things like that. And especially in Latin America, things like homosexuality, um, drug use, things like that, were very, very, very looked down on. And if anybody here has grown up in Latin America or has lived there for any amount of time, things like this are very, when there's issues in families, they're very, very hidden, very kind of passive aggressively pushed to the side, things like that. And it's very easy to get to learn from a very young age to sort of hide things that aren't considered acceptable or the norm in your family, even though they are a huge part of the world. Um, so until I was about 15 or 16, uh, my parents traveled a lot, mostly in Latin America. And after that, when I was about 17, I kind of took off on my own and I started traveling by myself. And through this traveling by myself, I found myself in Europe for a little bit. And most recently, before I landed in Texas, I was in Mexico for several years. And that's where I kind of started coming out of my religious background and sort of forming my own beliefs around religion, spirituality, myself as a queer person. That's where I came out when I was 17. I was living in Mexico City at the time. And my foray into the world had already kind of started on my own. A lot of cultural shock just being by myself without the religion and my parents there to help me along or support me or any. I was completely alone in a city as big as Mexico City. If anyone's been there, it's insanity. Um, but so I came out and that was a whole journey of its own. And my foray into the queer community was bartending in gay bars. And in the queer community, in the party scene, in the nightclub scene, obviously alcohol, but drugs are extremely prevalent, and there's so many sides to it. There's circuit parties, there's sex parties, there's the nightclubs, there's bars that are open, 24 hours a day. At least they were when I lived there. I don't know how it is now, but that was my introduction to the gay community, was partying. And considering the upbringing that I had, um, being very suffocated emotionally, I took I took on alcohol. I started drinking because, especially as a bartender in a gay bar, that's how I made friends with people. That's how I was able to let down those barriers of anxiety and fear of not knowing who I was, not knowing where I fit anywhere, and my substance use kind of just grew from there, getting invited to parties all over the place, being introduced to all kinds of different drugs. I can say that there are several drugs I've never tried, thankfully, because considering how far I went into my addiction with alcohol and cocaine, um, much harder drugs than that would have absolutely ruined me. And in spite of the resources available, the situations I was in, I probably would not have made it out. Um, so that was my introduction to being gay, and that's what I understood of the gay community. And so I lived in that scene for a while. uh, Arriving in Texas about 16 years ago, I moved up here from during that time, I should mention I started working in the restaurant industry, kind of moving away from the hardcore nightclub scene. I started modeling for a little bit, which came with its whole own set of parties and availability for drugs and alcohol. I ended up homeless for a little bit, not very long, thankfully, because I did have some friends that noticed what was going on. But I was stuck in this cycle of anxiety, depression, and fear that just kept me from reaching out and being vulnerable and admitting that I needed help in any capacity. So I moved to Texas to kind of get away from all of that and find something a little more stable. I've been here for 16 years, and uh, something also to mention is that in Latin America, being that people are afraid of a lot of things that don't really fit into a religious set of beliefs or values or morals or things like that. It's very there aren't there isn't a lot of public uh advertising about things like PrEP and HIV care and being safe. I had always heard, stay safe, always wear a condom, always use protection, blah, blah, blah. That's just kind of, but it became kind of this cliche rhetoric that I didn't really, nobody really told me, okay, this is what you do. I wasn't given the resources, but this is what you do. This is how you deal with this. If you come up against this, this is how, these are the resources. This is where you go. People were very, very secretive about it, especially because a lot of the people I knew that were gay were hidden from their families and they didn't want their doctors to know about their sexual activities and things like that. So there really wasn't any provided resource or information available for me. And when I came to the States, it was the first time that I actually saw around me like advertisements for HIV care, and this is what you need to do. So all that to say, I never actually got tested for the first 2 or 3 years that I was a bartender a cute bartender in a gay bar, sleeping around with everybody. And so it still took me a while before I didn't even go and get tested. I ended up in the emergency room in a hospital in Houston because of a peptic ulcer. Essentially, um, my stomach acids had burned a hole right through my stomach, and that came from rampant partying, terrible diet, and just essentially staying up all day and all night for days on end. And while I was in the emergency room, uh, some random person, he looked like a paramedic that came that had just stepped off of an ambulance in the emergency room, came and sat down, and I was completely high on morphine because they had just shot me up for pain. And he sat down and he said, he seemed very nervous and very just out of his element. And he was like, "So, have you ever gotten tested for STIs before?" And I was like, "No." And I knew it was coming. And just considering uh, that it was some random person sitting there and not a doctor, I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, there's this group of nurses and paramedics sat out there and drew straws to figure out who was going to come in and tell me this, and I knew it was coming. Um, And he was like, "Well, you tested positive for HIV." And he tried to go into this. He was extremely unprepared, and I could tell he didn't know anything about what he was talking about. But he tried to go into the thing of like, well, people with HIV, there's meds, and they live long and healthy lives and things like that. And so that was how I found out right before I went into this major surgery, was that I was HIV positive, and I couldn't really process it because I was completely shut up on morphine. And there was this person sitting there telling me that was completely unprepared for to tell me this and couldn't really offer me anything other than that, other than just letting me know that this is what's going on. So that kind of worsened my substance use, and I went into about 15 years of just very hard alcohol and cocaine use. And being a bartender, always readily available, being in the gay community, things like that, and many other drugs were readily available almost anywhere that I could possibly want to find them. Um, and so about 2 years ago, I decided, after a complete raging bender of 72 hours, during which I worked 2 shifts at work and ended up just lying on my couch shaking. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I finally decided that I needed to make a change for myself and my health, because my addiction in the past, before I moved from Houston to Austin, had led me to go for about a year and a half without taking my meds after I had already suppressed my viral load very, very faithfully. And so it got a bit out of hand. And So I went into November 7th. I will be celebrating 2 years sober from alcohol and cocaine, which is considering the life that I led before that is just an absolute like I'm still in shock. Um, I'm almost done here. I now I've always been a fierce advocate of queer celebration and and rights, and there are several career paths that I'm working on taking to further this. One of them being the a podcast that I'm producing, talking to local people in the Austin community about different parts of the queer community and policy, sex, sexual health, polyamory, all kinds of things. Um, And this opens a huge door for me to be very open about my journey with HIV and normalizing the conversation around STI testing, which I've always been very vocal about on social media. And I keep updated with people about my visits to the doctor and the different organizations here. And I've created sort of a network that people can, uh, a network of knowledge that I can direct people to because a lot of people come to me seeing my face and seeing me talk about these things. Um, So I think honestly throughout this whole journey, my biggest one of the biggest struggles I've faced is self-care and taking care of my health and being on top of what I am my goals for myself, fitness, making sure that I'm taking my antiretrovirals every day. I suffer from chronic depression and generalized anxiety. And most of what's helped me get to this point and be able uh to do the projects for the community that I've been doing that I have been working on is the networks of peer support that I have around me, which I'm getting more involved with now. Also the organizations like Vivint Health. I think I saw someone mentioned that they work there up in Milwaukee, and just um, having these organizations that include things like dental and behavioral health and food banks and things like that. These are the organizations that have helped me pull through that the most because there are times when I have an appointment, I'm so full of anxiety and I'm so scared to get out of bed because of the unknowns that are around me. But just knowing that when I get to that point, when I get to that appointment, that the staff and the resources that are there will be there for me and will help put me in a safe space. Those are the things. Those are the kinds of things that pull me through every day to handle these issues. Thank you all for allowing me to share. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Miguel. And our last panelist, but certainly not least, from my new favorite city and state, Denver, Colorado. JJ.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks to NOED, thanks to Faces and Voices of Recovery, thanks to the ORN, the Opioid Response Network, for sponsoring. Yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. This is just something I am so happy and privileged to be a part of. Um, Sunday will be my 7th year of being HIV positive. I was diagnosed on my parents' wedding anniversary, ironically, 7 years ago. I'll try to make this short so we can get to the questions, but I grew up in a very broken household. Parents who suffered major mental illness. Father has been addicted all of my life. And so didn't really question the fact that he offered me drugs when I was 12 years old, thinking it was just normalized and safe. Also grew up the eldest of 3 children, needing to take care of my brother and sister, mother and father them, since my father never really was there, never really was present. Slept until 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon while my mother, who was a nurse, worked 60 hours a week in the ER. And so I grew up just thinking, not really having a childhood in a sense, but needing to be a parent for my two siblings and cook for them and clean and so forth. Anyway, I ended up having a gift of leaving this country for 20 years thanks to my grandmother and getting a scholarship to go study abroad in Paris when I was 18. And that really changed a lot of things of the way I looked at my own upbringing, the life and some of the things that I tended to take for granted, growing up in America until 18 years old. It was the way we look at treatment and healthcare and especially the way we sort of take care of each other. And so it really changed the way that I sort of saw a lot of the life I went up and grew up in. I stayed away from drugs until I was turned 35 and moved to Berlin and became 18 again and discovered the nightlife and the scene and sex clubs and a lot of parties and cocaine, ketamine, and then that spiraled into meth later on. But it was somewhere where I felt safe. I never really felt safe at all as a child. With a very abusive father, ended up in a domestic violence relationship much later on with a man who I just normalized that. I thought that I deserved to be hurt and shamed and guilted. And so drugs helped me feel safe, and crystal meth specifically was my gateway out of my head. It was out of my anxiety, out of the stress of living as a closeted gay kid who never had any reference, anyone to look up to, an uncle, a cousin, or whatever. And so I created all of that trauma, or continued all that trauma, sort of in guilt and shame in my own head. In 2018, I was working bartending actually in a gay bar in Berlin, and had a really rough night. Had way too much to drink, and ended up blacking out on GHB that was given to me by someone, and I was raped between two cars in the middle of the street. When I called out and realized what happened, I went back and talked to some people, and they said, "Oh, well, you wanted it," and it really where I started setting boundaries with myself. We need to denormalize the fact that there's a lot of misogyny in the queer community, and that substance use is part of life. No, it's not. And I'm really, really grateful to be able to have gone through that to share my own experience now with the people I get to work with. I came back to America in end of 2018, struggled a bit for about a year, moved up to New York City, and had the blessing of meeting Crystal Meth Anonymous, and started my treatment in IOP at the center, so the LGBTQ center in New York. They saved my life, along with a lot of other people. And just knowing that all of that shame and stigma, we can just nip that in the bud by believing in ourselves. And I'm just so grateful for so many people who've been with me in my journey, one of whom was a peer in my IOP that sort of planted that seed of me wanting to become a peer much later on. I moved to Denver 3 years ago now, continued my HIV treatment in Denver. And one of the reasons, I think, just to refer to one of the questions there too, was my HIV doc here in New York was so incredibly, she saw me as a person rather than a patient and a number. And that trust and level of care, I just reached out to her, told her I think I would like to become a peer someday. Just got my credentials a few weeks ago, and now I get to work with teenagers at Denver Health Hospital Authority, helping them find safe spaces to believe in who they really are. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell, and I'm just really, really grateful to be here.
Thank you, JJ. And we're grateful that you are here as well as all our other panelists as well. Wow. Just just being in y'all's presence and hearing a bit of your story always pulls heartstrings. Patrick, slides. So as we pull the slides up, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, identifies 4 dimensions of recovery: health, home, purpose, and community. And ideally, substance use and mental health treatment includes services and supports that supports these dimensions. These types of recovery support services may be emotional, informational, instrumental, or affiliational in nature. So kind of setting that stage, if you will, for our next question. To our attendees, we'll have the slides available to you all. And if you weren't following chat, I was so excited to hear from our panelists that I skipped over learning objectives, but I dropped those learning objectives in chat so you can review those as well. We'll go to our question, and we're going to round robin start off with Chris here. What types of support were most helpful to you during your recovery process? And we can go ahead and take down slides.
What type of support? I think finding community, right? I do go to 12-step community, and one of the things that I've really been instrumental here in the New York City Fellowship is for Black folks specifically, but also for POC. We don't see ourselves reflected in the rooms a lot of the times, and when we do come in, we don't stay. And so we're really intentional in making sure that those folks who do come in know that they do have a place here, they do deserve recovery, and that there is long-term sobriety. And that, I think, has been the most impactful thing for me. And then also just I'm dual diagnosis. So just working with my psych and making sure that my meds are right. That has been super helpful. And, I say this all the time, just go where the water is warm. If things don't feel right, I'm lucky I live in New York, where there are tons of meetings and tons of agencies out here who are super helpful for folks who are like me, who are HIV positive, but also struggling with substance use disorder.
I love that. Go where the water is warm. All right. Same question to you, Scott. Oh, you got to unmute.
Sorry. You probably will hear
Folks
you probably will
getting
hear buzzing in the background. We're in a barber shop. So I apologize. I'll be honest with you, for me, the mental health aspect was the biggest part of it. Aside from the fact that I have to tell you that, and everyone needs to know that Joseph Sanchez is probably one of the most important people in my recovery, because he loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. And that was really important, because I needed to be able to make mistakes and still be loved, instead of making mistakes and getting yelled at, which was sort of what the path was in my family situation. But for me, the mental health aspect was big, because I had developed such a large ego, that I ended up really not liking myself. And it was actually the therapist who was on staff at the treatment center in Minneapolis, St. Paul, who actually took me outside. I was talking about, people irritate me, people do this, and he said, I'm gonna take you outside. And he looked at me and he said, look at that tree. I'm going to explain this tree to you. And he explained it. It had a big, it had a big base. It had, moss growing on it, blah, 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 blah. And he said, what's your anxiety level like right now? And I said, well, gosh, it's like 0. And he said, imagine if you could just look at people like that. And it was a huge help for me. So, for me, the mental health was the biggest part because the work of the steps brings up a lot of stuff. And if you don't know how to process that, and if you don't have help processing that, you're gonna, I didn't know how to process what was going on. And so I relapsed, so, the mental health aspect was huge for me.
All right, thank you. Miguel?
Yeah, I definitely got to agree with that. The mental health part of it was the physical detox was not easy in any way, but the it, it was a visual hands-on way that I could see being an addict, instant gratification is something that is very, very prevalent in my mental health. But the physical detox was one thing, but the mental detox was an entirely other thing that I was not prepared for. And the mental health side of it, and being able to, by that time, thankfully, having found a few professionals in the recovery industry, in recovery organizations, and being able to talk with them and kind of understand sort of a more structured layout of what recovery looks like. That and being able to go to therapy without having to pay for insurance or anything like that was a huge help, and being able to get on meds that helped pull me through that honestly was a part of me being able to step out and find community and find a support system. Because without those, I would have just been stuck in, like I said before, my loop of anxiety and depression, and I wouldn't have wanted to leave my house. I still would have been sober, but just a lot more sad and angry.
Thank you, Miguel. JJ?
Yeah, there's so many people, but again, it was back in New York at the center. I had just such a wonderful, compassionate, trauma informed, I'll repeat that over and over, therapist, who saw me for who I am. And then again, just not another number, not another patient. And then now to my doc, who's now a colleague at Denver Health, who again, I know her life story, I know the names of her children, and she saw me as a person, and it just changes the way I see myself and my own recovery. So just incredibly grateful for that.
Absolutely. Being treated as a person uh, in any health circumstance, especially by a medical professional, is very helpful. Um, we have a few questions, and I think that along the lines we have kind of addressed a couple of what stood out as helpful about professionals, and that kind of leads us to my next question. Setting it up, and we don't need to pull up the slides, Patrick, but um, peers, peer recovery coaches, peer specialists, they've traditionally been found in grassroots recovery community organizations or RCOs. And now we're seeing them in different treatment settings and a whole bunch of different settings. Um, how did the support that you receive from healthcare providers, be it peers or community resources, how did that impact your journey, or in what ways? What worked? What reached you? And we'll start off with JJ.
Um, yeah, I had a peer who joined our counselor in our group IOP back in New York, and I had no idea. I'd never even heard the weird word. I had no idea what a peer recovery coach, peer support specialist was, and we had a wonderful therapist, but the combination between the clinical and the non-clinical, and hearing his story, I identified, I saw myself in his story, in his journey, and it just changed my life. And now 2.5 later, 2.5, 3 to 4 years later, decided to become a peer myself, and it's obviously something I obviously firmly believe in, and without that, I don't think I'd be doing, I absolutely know I wouldn't be doing what I do today. So
Absolutely. And again, working in not a traditional RCO, recovery community organization setting, but in a hospital. So that's really cool. And Miguel?
Uh, yeah, so honestly, the same. I didn't know what peer support was, or that it was an actual like a thing, until about 6, 7 months into my recovery. Um, Through someone who worked as a peer support specialist and does training for them for certification programs. And so, considering the childhood that I grew up in, very cultish and everything, and I'm not using this label for certain recovery programs, but for example, like the AA didn't really speak to me. I grew up in that setting. It was very traumatic for me because it was very religious based, very this is the way you have to live. This is the only way for you to live. And understanding that through peer support, that recovery was my own journey. And I don't believe that about all AA meetings, by the way, just putting that out there. Um, Peer support was a way uh, of discovering harm reduction and understanding that there was nothing wrong with me as an addict, that I could have an open conversation with almost anybody and use my experience even to take it a step further and continue my recovery journey in a way that helps other people. And that helped that to this day, being having multiple avenues, and seeing examples of multiple avenues of helping the community around me has helped me stay sober from the substances that I had issues with. And it helped me to feel much more calm in myself and much more confident that I could take on, uh, you know, another day, and then another day after that, and another day after that of my recovery.
Thank you, Miguel. Scott? Scotty, gotta unmute.
Dang it. So I'll be honest, like the first time that I went into the treatment, it was just like peer recovery support services were just starting to be noticed. So that was 2015. So, I mean, most of my information about peer recovery, support services came from Joseph. Um, One thing I do want to mention was in last November when I was in treatment. There was a barrier actually to peer recovery support services for me because I did not go. I went through insurance, and they wouldn't. I didn't qualify for peer recovery support services. It was peer recovery support services were for the people who weren't able to pay with insurance. It had to do something with that. So now that it's starting to move into the medical, the medical field, um, there's, I'm now starting to see that maybe insurance companies are now starting to do what they do, which is decide that they're going to tell us what our healthcare options are. And just to be a little bit vulgar, that's bullshit. Um, that's bullshit. So the one thing is that I saw the peer recovery support people that I saw, they were amazing. They did anything they would speak to the clients, and they would do anything for them. And you know what? When you reach the honesty of being able to say that it's not okay and I don't know what to do and I need help, those people coming in and doing anything is really, I think it was important.
Thank you, Scotty. And Chris.
Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah, absolutely. How did the support you received from healthcare providers, peers, and community resources impact your journey?
Okay,
In
that's
what?
right. Yeah, I think, just going back to this like notion that just getting treated like a human, and reminding me that I have value and worth and I deserve recovery, and that was really the biggest thing for me. I don't have any experience with peer recovery services, things like that, but like, my general doctor has watched me. We've been working together for almost 15 years, and he sort of watched me at the lowest parts of my life and always was like, recovery is possible. You can do it. And just, yeah, just always just treating me like a human being, like whenever you're ready, I know that there are options out there for you. And then as I started to get sober, just watching he just be so proud. He's like the longest relationship I've ever had is with my doctor, which is wild. But I love that man so much. He's so great. Yeah, I don't know. And just yeah, just getting treated like a human and meeting me where I'm at was a huge thing, just like just meeting me where I was at. And because some days I'm more willing than others, and that's really it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. I know that we are coming to time. I want to pose a question, actually a request to our attendees. In one word, if you could drop into chat one word that resonates with you after hearing from our panelists. And panelists, your final thoughts, if you will, some lasting thoughts that you can leave our attendees with, like some hopes, some inspiration, some recommendation, lasting thoughts for our attendees. Chris, to you.
Lasting thoughts. I would say for all of you who are working with this particular subset of community, right? Just remember that these are people who are going through some of the toughest times of their lives, and they may not understand that they need help, but just again, trying to meet them where they're at and let them know that there is another way out. And that there are people out here who are living, thank you so much, Cheryl, that they're living beautiful, full lives on the other side of what seems like the worst moments in their life.
Thank you, Chris. Scotty.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Congratulations.
So, when I was asked to be a panelist, I actually spoke to a good friend of mine here, Rocco Cook, and Rocco works with ASU, Arizona State University, and also the Department of Health. He's sort of their HIV services and information guy. And I said, what is one thing that you would like for professionals to know? And he said, we have to stop when we're talking about the intersection of recovery and HIV. We have to stop treating HIV just as like you described, just as like, it's like diabetes. It goes beyond just a medical diagnosis. It also deals with there's a huge social aspect that we need to start dealing with. Stigma. We have to start working with stigma, because that keeps people from getting the help that they need. And I just think that the people who are working in this field, thank you very much, because I need your help and you're there to help me. So thank you.
Thank you, Scotty. Miguel?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the amazing words here in the chat. It's really very encouraging and confidence boosting. I think the main thing that I would that I would leave with any medical professional is like, please, I've come up, I've visited healthcare providers that don't really know that offer services, HIV services, but don't really understand what that entails or how to communicate HIV care and personal health care and things within the queer community. And obviously, like it might not be a part of what you're used to being around or in the culture or anything, but um, maybe talk. You definitely have a gay friend. I can I can guarantee that. Talk to them and find out what their experience is, and especially in your local community, and find out how you can ask how you could better serve them, and so that you're able to have a conversation with them as a person and not as a case of HIV that just needs to be treated.
Thank you. And JJ.
Yeah, just a reminder that, we're all human, and just, something that I really feel strongly about is that we use human people first language, and just as much for HIV as for substance use disorders, and just also when we collaborate more with mental health providers in that continuum of care. And that can be anywhere from the EMTs to the ED to outpatient, inpatient. We're all in this together. And the more we de-silo our medical and mental health care systems, the more we're going to help people. Because a lot of times we're working on these projects that other people don't even know. And so just collaboration is key, and reminding ourselves that these are human lives we're working with, and not just numbers and patients. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and what a great note to end on. And if you didn't see in chat, we do have a list dropped in the survey. It's our feedback survey on this session. If you want a part two, I would definitely include that as some of your feedback recommendations. Thank you to our panelists, wholehearted. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear from you all, and to share that vulnerable pieces of your lives with us. And with that, I believe we're done, unless there is any other announcements from Nahud. No. Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Again, thank you, panelists.
Thank you
And
to our healthcare workers. You've saved our lives.
Yes, 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 yes. I agree. I also agree with one of the people in the chat, Chris. Your bracelets are on fire.
Yeah, they are.
and with that, don't forget to fill out your survey. Have an excellent Friday Eve, if you will. And thank you so much.